I have goosebumps. I have actual goosebumps right now. I know 100% the ending of this book, and I'm going to lock it the in. No, okay, lesson learned. I thought maybe I'd go from the Sherlock to a balaclava, but Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Can a Goblin Solve It All? Today, we are going to be taking on yet another Agatha Christie epic. I know in the last Solve It All, I said we are going to be switching away from Agatha Christie, but one of you all sold me this story so well in the comments section as the perfect book to take on for this formula that I just had to do it. And you saw the title, you're well aware that is going to be Agatha Christie's 5 Little Piggies. But why was this the perfect formula that was so tantalizing I had to scoop it on up right away? Well, apparently, going off of purely what this comment said, they could have lied, I'm not sure. This is actually a quote-unquote missolved case where they've arrested potentially the wrong person. Maybe that's the misdirect. I don't know yet. And Poirot is actually going to be going back and looking over 5 different suspects' statements, trying to find incongruities and find the true killer. So structurally, that's just going to be an absolute banger for me to go through each statement and profile, try and sniff out the actual guilty party, and declare the murderer here on the board. But I'm going to actually come in with a bold prediction. This is Agatha Christie, the queen of murder mystery. What would the ultimate misdirect be? I'm gonna go for a full Hail Mary here. I'm going, I have not read a word of this book trying to call the ending. The original guilty party, the person who was first arrested, is actually the killer. That's going to be the twist. Just, if I got that right now, holy shit. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and check on out the actual synopsis of the story and see if even that comment was just lying to me. Let's see here, shall we? Beautiful Caroline Crail was convicted of poisoning her husband. But, just like the nursery rhyme, there were 5 other, quote, little pigs, close quote, who could have done it. Philip Blake, the stockbroker, he went to the market. Meredith Blake, the amateur herbalist, who stayed at home. Elsa Greer, the 3-time divorcee, who had her roast beef. Cecilia Williams, the devoted governess, who had none. And Angela Warren, the sister, who cried all the way home. 16 years later, wow, this person's been in jail for a crime they didn't commit for a long time. Caroline's daughter is determined to prove her mother's innocence, and Poirot just can't get that nursery rhyme out of his mind. And judging by the list of Poirot tales along the side here, hot damn, this is late in his career. I love that I can do these out of order and they just kind of fit. Let's jump on into it. Huzzah!
2 hours later.
All right, y'all, I'm so excited to talk about this because Agatha Christie is kind of making her way up to my, speculative fiction Mount Rushmore. I'm not even playing. Every mystery of hers is so well set up and delivered, and so curious. So curious! I'm excited. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I planned on actually getting further into this book, but in her typical info dump fashion, we just get a deluge of information that I want to ponder our way across before we get into the meat of the story, because it just generated so many ideas percolating in this little brain of mine. Literally the first lines of this book are foot, gas pedal, go, because we see a woman named Clara Lamarchant has come to see our boy Poirot, and she tells him, actually, that's not my real name. Subterfuge! Because her real name is Caroline Crail. Now, Caroline Crail, Poirot notes, is quite beautiful and seems to be well off. The AC's still on, gotta turn that off. But her real name of Crail, Poirot recognizes because there was a famous murder trial 16 years ago of a woman of the same name killing her husband, Amyas Crail, who was a famous painter. And so this is their daughter, who was 5 at the time, returning from Canada to try and get our famous detective to clear her mother's name. But why would she think that her mother is innocent after all this time? That is set up and paid off quite well between the conversation of Poirot and Caroline Crail, because she received a letter from her mother, who died not long after her conviction of jail, and the letter was instructed to be left to the daughter when she turned 21. So when she did, she got this letter where her mother decries her innocence and says, "I didn't kill your father, and it's important to me that you know that." Okay. That's good motivation. Let's double down and make us as the reader care twice as much, because Caroline also is about to get married to a feller named John, and she does not want to have this cloud of husband-wife murder hanging over her new relationship. And while John's telling her, like, no, I don't care that your mom killed your dad, every time they have a fight, there's still like a look in John's eyes that's like, don't poison me like your mom did your dad, please. And she wants to get rid of that. We understand that Caroline is quite intelligent, quite a powerful, striking woman in her own right, beyond the making Poirot feel younger and more vigorous, he overtly says in the text, meaning she's hot and giving him a little bit of reminding him he's in the third stage of his life, but he's determined to help her because of this vigorous feeling coursing through his veins. Penis. But when speaking on such an old case, she gets Poirot to basically say, yeah, I don't need evidence like bent grass and cigarette butts. I'm the GOAT! I'm the greatest of all time. I sit in my chair after I have the thoughts and I think about it and I figure out the crime. And so at the end of this, when Poirot is saying, hey, maybe your mom's gonna be guilty and this is a really old case, it's gonna be hard, Caroline's like, well, you're the GOAT! You don't need the evidence. You need the psychology. And this is also a masked challenge to the reader by Agatha Christie. She is letting us know that we are going to be getting profiles of 5 little piggies, and we are going to have to deduce, not through hard evidence, but through personality profiles, who is really the killer. And I find that so enticing. And so right away at the beginning of this book, we have it set up immediately that we have this beautiful young woman who wants to get married, have a bunch of children with her husband, but she has this violence hanging over her head within her family that is upsetting. And Poirot says, hey, everyone's got violence in their family. It doesn't mean you are. And she's like, I know, but still, it's so recent and in the headlines, and I had to change my name and move to Canada, and everyone lied to me about it. And now my mom says she's innocent, so it's gonna be in my noggin, and you're the GOAT! So get buying and figure it out. And that is what makes Poirot decide to take this on. We also get a little bit of characterization of the mother from the few memories that the daughter has. And they are what make me renege my accusation at the start that the mother actually did do it, because Agatha Christie is clearly setting it up narratively for her not to have done it. Because the mother isn't just some flawlessly likable person. One, she does have a redeeming quality that she would not lie to her daughter. Even the few memories her 5-year-old daughter at the time does have of her mother are of like when they're going to the dentist, her mom's gonna be like, this got hurt like a... So she is not gonna like just have the last thing she says to her daughter be a lie. She's not gonna pin a letter to send off to her daughter to have a lie to hopefully make her daughter think she didn't murder her husband. And that is, one, enough to kind of make me back off my accusation, but now to throw it fully in the trash comes with Poirot's first action, because we start book 1. Apparently this is broken into books, not entirely sure why, where he goes to see the counsel for the defense, de Bleach. And this conversation is Agatha Christie letting us know as the reader 100% this mom did not do it, and let's get into why. Well, her defense attorney immediately accuses her of being unbalanced. She likely didn't get the best defense attorney, it seems, because this guy was like, that crazy woman definitely killed her husband, though there is a lot of evidence she did kill her husband, which again, from Ags, is letting me know fist bump. Boom. This woman did not kill her husband. Her husband maybe did deserve to die a little bit. Not entirely, I said a little bit, because he was a player who was cheating on her and causing a lot of jealousy. This escalated because he started seeing a pretty young thing, a 20-year-old named Elsa Greer. And this took their normal, jealousy over the cheating and steroid injected it to full-on bad news. People heard that Caroline, Senior de Madère, threatened to kill her husband, and talk of divorce happening from the famous painter, who is now actually doing paintings of Elsa Greer that looked so incredible. Uh-oh. A neighbor was also a bit of a chemist, an herbalist, someone who had access to poisons. And a conversation happened right before the poisoning. Yes, this was a poisoning, where the poison was discussed in front of Caroline Crail, so that this is now perfectly set up for Caroline to have known the poison to be used on her husband. Then we also have the additional problem of the wife brought the poison to the husband in a beer, allegedly, and he was found then after he was left alone in the garden dead. Though there is a gap of time where apparently Caroline did leave for a while, I believe with her governess friend, we're going to talk about later. So there was a gap of witness where someone else could have poisoned the husband. I also want to say this neighbor, clearly a red herring. I know everyone's going to say, oh, the herbalist, they're the poisoner. Too obvious. Moving on. I'm already going to rule them out right away. Not the murder. It turns out their name's Meredith Blake. I'm saying no, not the killer. All of this takes us to Poirot repeatedly asking Depleach, do you think that Clara did it? And Depleach is like, she did. She definitely did. Don't even bother investigating this. You're taking money from a poor girl who's just not willing to accept the fact that her mom's dead, that her mom's a serial killer. She accepts the fact that her mom's dead. There's not a zombie side arc that I'm aware of yet. Just to reemphasize exactly how bad this is getting, let's read a brief passage. Caroline Krill wasn't standing for that. She threatened to kill him. She was overheard by two people to say that if he didn't give up the girl, she'd kill him. And she meant it all right. The day before it happened, they'd been having tea with a neighbor. He was by way of dabbling in herbs and homebrew medicines. Amongst his patent brews was one of conine, spotted hemlock. There was some talk about it and its deadly properties. The next day, he noticed that half of the contents of the bottle had gone. Got the wind up about it. They found an almost empty bottle of it in Miss Crail's room, hidden away at the bottom of a drawer. Hercule Poirot moved uncomfortably. He said, "Somebody else might have put it there." Oh, she admitted to the police she'd taken it. Very unwise, of course. She didn't have a solicitor to advise her at that stage. When they asked her about it, she admitted quite frankly that she had taken it. For what reason? She made out that she'd taken it with the idea of doing herself in. She couldn't explain how the bottle came to be empty, nor how it was that there were only her fingerprints on it. That part of it was pretty damaging. She contended, you see, that Amyas Crail had committed suicide, but he'd taken the conine from the bottle she'd hidden in her room. His fingerprints would have been on the bottle as well as hers. It was given to him in the beer, was it not? Yes. She got out the bottle from the refrigerator and took it down herself to where he was painting in the garden. She poured it out and gave it to him and watched him drink it. Everyone went up to lunch and left him. He often didn't come in to meals. Afterwards, she and the governess found him there dead. Her story was that the beer she gave him was all right. Our theory was that he suddenly felt so worried and remorseful that he slipped the poison in himself. All poppycock. He wasn't that kind of man, and the fingerprint evidence was the most damning of all. They found her fingerprints on the bottle? No, they didn't. They only found his. And they were phony ones. She was alone with the body, you see, while a governess went up to call the doctor, and what she must have done was to wipe the bottle and glass, then press his fingers on them. She wanted to pretend, you see, that she'd never even handled the stuff. Well, that didn't work. Old Rudolph, who was the prosecuting, love that someone's named Rudolph here, had a lot of fun with that, proved quite definitively by demonstration in court that a man couldn't hold a bottle with his fingers in that position. Crail! This is bad luck. Woman, this is a bad look, and that's why I think you're innocent, because this is speculative fiction. If all that evidence was in a regular murder trial, I would very much so believe that person had done it. So I don't blame the jury for actually finding Caroline Crail super guilty. I'm still getting over bronchitis, I apologize. But this takes us to the profiles, the 5 suspects connected to the case that Poirot is going to be taking a look at. First, the defense attorney tells him about Philip Blake, who was the painter husband Amyas's best friend. Then we have Meredith Blake, the chemist neighbor who is also the brother of Philip Blake. Then, of course, we have Elsa Greer, as Poirot refers to her because he's reciting the Five Little Pigs poem in his head because one went to the market, one stayed home. Meredith is a bit of a shut-in. And Elsa is the one, according to Poirot, who ate roast beef. And then they even say, like, oh, he gave her all the meat. But in the time of Agatha Christie, that doesn't mean what it means now. But, like, Jesus Christ.
Lovely bit of phrasing, isn't it?
Who has actually had quite a few marriages and divorces and is now known as Lady Ditisham. This is followed up by a name, the governess, that the defense attorney can't quite remember because it's 17 years ago. It's either Thompson or Jones, and that's just the governess friend of the guilty party or presumed guilty party. And then we have Angela Warren, who, by the description we're given, was an archaeologist and is also disfigured. And that's why Poirot's like, who went wee, had something to cry about, her disfigurement. Good God. And at this point, I am going to try and do a bit of psychology on Agatha Christie. That's right. I'm turning the something around and going to try and do this because I have now read three Agatha Christie books. It's never been a woman. I'm not saying nothing about that. Like, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just pointing out objectively, has not been a woman killer yet. So, I am going to say she doesn't like having women killers, and I'm going to scratch out Elsa and this governess Thompson Jones, who we're not sure of, and also Angela Warren. And that leaves us Philip Blake. And for some reason, I'm inclined to think it's the best friend. Why? Literally no reason so far. I just need to have, at this point in the video, another suspect. Now that I'm saying, she did not do it. But these, ladies and gentlemen, are our 5 little piggies. And what are these hairs in the chinny chin? That's one of them feeling some guilt. And so they're growing chin hairs. Now we move on to me consuming a lot more of the story and probably having different thoughts and theories. I do know the who. I don't know the who. I know who died, and that would be Amyas. I know where. He died in a garden. Why? He was poisoned with a beer. When? During lunch. So I actually have quite a bit of this mystery. I have the where, what, what. The poison. The poison would be the what here. And the why. Well, the narrative so far is saying because of the mistress, but yet perhaps to find that is a false why. So we don't have the why. We have the where, the when, the what. I need the why and the who. That's the 2 parts of this mystery that are not true so far. The why and the who. Let's figure them out. Let's go to Whoville. One of 3 things has just happened. Either Agatha Christie has painted her most obvious murder mystery yet while planting a delightfully tactful false red herring to redirect us somewhere else while showing us the murder in broad daylight. Or option 2, there is a very overt red herring that is meant to distract you while the actual killer is just over here in the corner so subtly that unless you're paying nerdy attention and taking notes on the board, you might miss it entirely. There's a third option, and that's that everything I'm about to say and guess at is entirely wrong. But what I do know is that most likely my whole no woman killer thing is wrong because my 2 prime suspects for murder, now 3 actually, are 2 women and a guy with a girl's name. Let's kick it off because we have one more quick section to get through before we start getting into our 5 little piggies interviews. Because Poirot is going to actually interview the 5 suspects, but before he does, intelligently as the inspector he is, he goes and talks to everyone involved in the defense and the prosecution first. And we learn just how bad this trial was in so many different ways, including ones that indicate like psychological misgivings and preconceptions about the suspects and the murder victims. I think Agatha Christie was streets ahead when it came to her time and understanding how people actually worked. This is a continued thing I've pointed out in her material, and I think it's what makes her a murder mystery author that actually holds up to this day. I don't know exactly where the fields of psychology were throughout Agatha Christie's time. I'm just saying she seemed to have a really good read of people. Now, as you already saw, we talked to the defense attorney. We jump on over to speaking with the prosecutor, and he is already so much more capable than Caroline's defense attorney was, so she got boned. Because this man is described as an augur and just a top law man, and not like celebrity, just a good, grounded lawyer. And I feel like indicating to us, the reader, that is the best endorsement a character can have in murder mystery. They don't care about the spotlight. They're just damn good at their job. And I'm sorry, someone being reminded as an augur. I know Billy Mays is known for the white powder. I mean that in two ways. But the infomercial that stuck with me forever with him was the awesome augur.
Billy Mays here with the awesome augur.
Do y'all remember that? Did anyone buy that? Was that a good product? I feel like it would be. But the prosecutor actually feels kind of bad because he said there was no sport in Caroline. And while her defense attorney did do the best he could trying to paint this elaborate story about how Emyas, or however the hell you say that name, did commit suicide out of guilt, in reality, he was one of two actors. And without Caroline on the stand being able to give him what he needed to work with, it ended up falling flat. And overall, she was pathetic. But this is where our first suspect really begins to take form, and the narrative almost becomes obsessed with this woman, because the prosecutor also talks about how bold and great Elsa Greer was on the stand. And while people definitely thought she was a bit of a hussy, she actually is even called that by our next person we're talking to, she like swung just as good as she got and had a lot of guts and had this kind of I don't care, I loved my married affair partner attitude that was, one, made the judge hate her, like the jury not like her, but kind of respect her. Meanwhile, Caroline was just sad and seemed detached and not engaged at all. This is emphasized throughout everyone because she just seemed like half her heart died. And boy, doesn't that seem like she wouldn't be the one to have killed her husband then. But her overall demeanor was to kind of zone out with a slight smile for Caroline. And if you compare that with the guts that are re-emphasized from Elsa, I really am starting to think that Elsa could have been the killer at this point in my reading, he says, to save his ass later. Because thematically, it's being set up as there's this strong, gutsy woman fighting to get the murderous wife thrown in prison because she gives a hell of a lot of testimony to damn Caroline. And then you have Caroline, who's the opposite, just broken, unable to even properly defend herself. But from here, we talk to the young solicitor, and this guy is Elsa obsessed. And if you're thinking, wait, we're two people deep in this section and no one's talking about Meredith or Angela or any of the other five little piggies, that's where I started to be like, boy, this is sure obvious in some ways, because I'm even starting to think that Elsa might be a bit of a Black Widow, because what we learn is she's no longer Elsa Greer. She's 3 times divorced and quite the wealthy woman. But divorce doesn't mean Black Widow. Their future partners didn't die. At least that hasn't been said to us yet. She is painted, especially by the young solicitor, to be greedy. She's rich now, but we're completely lacking a motive. Why would she murder this famous painter she's obsessed with when he seems set up to be about to leave his wife for her? Doesn't make any sense. And so this is why I think it could be option 2, where there's this blatant red herring we're focusing all this energy on, and we're gonna see who might actually be our murderer later. Because there's something else. I think Agatha Christie, I know I did the observation about she didn't have any female killers. I could be wrong. I think unless it's Meredith, who's a guy with a girl's name, but I think I'm wrong about that observation, and I should have instead hung my hat on the pattern I've also seen of the killers within these stories not exactly being likable. So Elsa, not likable. So that checks at least one of my boxes. And this is when she's called a hussy. I don't like that insult. That hussy doesn't sound good. It's got sexist implications. I'm never going to call someone a hussy. I'll call someone a husky if they're rambunctious. But this takes us to the old solicitor, and he re-emphasizes that this is a case based on character, and that is a signal for us, the reader, I believe. He also tells a story about Caroline's temper. Remember, Angela, her younger sister, is deformed. And it turns out Angela's from another marriage from her father, and Caroline potentially threw a paperweight at Angela, hit her, and that's what caused the disfigurement. And that story sets up the whole temperament for people of, oh, could she have been the murderer? But that doesn't really hold up in my mind very well. I'm not trying to be like overly on Caroline's side. I do not think Caroline actually did the killing, and I do not think it was an unaliving of one's self. But this is the kind of story that when someone's a kid, yeah, you accidentally hurt your siblings or step siblings. I have several scars on my head from when my brother tripped me into a fireplace, when I was punched into a wall, tripped in a gravel pit. Siblings hurt each other. That's not indicative of like a horrible temper later in life. He also points out that Elsa really was set up to get everything she wants at this point. It does not make sense for Elsa Greer to be the killer. She was going to get the painter. He was planning on leaving Caroline for her, and she was actually like the star of his latest painting. Yas, the painter, was crafting this beautiful portrait of Elsa by the water, and she's barely wearing any clothes. And he's doing this while openly having an affair his wife knows about. These are messy people. Agatha Christie likes writing some messy f***ers. But this final interview is where we get a lot of information. If you can't tell, I thought all these were going to be like equally kind of spaced, and I had to crowd quite a bit because we speak to the former police superintendent. And the first thing he says, I think, is very important. He says that Poirot should just lie to Caroline's daughter, Caroline Jr., and tell her that her father committed suicide so she could at least have the belief that her mother wasn't a killer, because her mother was most certainly a killer. Whoa, a cop is telling Poirot to lie to somebody? I don't like that, sir. And this leads to many other revelations because this police officer actually remembers basically the whole setup of the house. And this is where we have it confirmed that at the time of the murder, Elsa Greer is at the house. Looking guilty, but maybe too guilty. Agatha Christie likes those red herrings. So she's at the house, and apparently what exactly happened was there were people coming to check up on the painter. It was his wife and Angela Warren. They parted just before the wife found the body. Caroline finds the body and immediately screams for help. I like that detail at once it happens, because if you're trying to set up a beat where maybe Caroline's wiping fingerprints or covering something up, you don't say it happened at once, but it happened at once. I really don't think Caroline did it. I'm putting her in the clear list. Contradicting what I said before, my remaining suspects are women and a man with a woman's name. Because we also learn just exactly what were the circumstances that Meredith Blake brought these people through his lab and was like, and then there's this poison right here that you can poison people with. Everyone here now knows, so that when a murder comes on later, I won't be the only person who knows about this poison that's about to go missing. This is a big deal, because we already know that Caroline admitted to stealing this poison, but who put that idea in her head? Meredith, definitely. Is there a bit of a relationship between perhaps Elsa Greer and Meredith Blake, who actually has a perfect alibi, wasn't even at the house? So he would have had to set someone else to plant the poison, but what would Meredith Blake's motivation be as this chemist who already knew the poison was missing and hadn't reported it for some reason to do this? Well, his brother is best friends with this painter. Was there some odd jealousy happening here? I'm not sure, but I did start considering again a murder duo. I know I've thought this is a thing before in Agatha Christie cases, but I'm really starting to think a murder duo could be possible here. I think possibly, because it gives Elsa Greer a poison that everyone then knows about, Blake the opportunity to not be there, and then Elsa Greer is clearly seen by a couple other people during this time when the poisoning is happening. And we also have testimony that, yes, it is true, does not make Caroline look good, because Oddly, just before the painter got back from a break in his garden, Elsa Greer started going through the house and saying, like, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to change this in the house when I marry your husband. What the f*** are you doing? And of course, this set off Caroline and this big fight. And at that point, Elsa Greer, in front of other people, awkwardly just told Caroline, your husband's going to leave you for me and we're getting married. Hope you and him can stay friends. Ah! What the f***? Horrible person, and Agatha Christie likes making horrible people the killers. Maybe it's too obvious. Hold your butts. This was witnessed by 2 people, and Caroline did say here for sure to the woman who was just having an affair with her husband and posing basically naked for him that you can have him over his dead body. Not yours, not mine, his. A little bit of a weird aggressive thing there, and if Elsa was planning the murder, she just went cha-ching, victory. Yet, there's a problem. We have additional testimony later on that almost starts getting comical. And I'm actually going to read this passage and just know that it went from multiple people being a witness to Caroline saying something that could be said in the heat of moment believably, to now just Elsa Greer says this next part that's a little bit over the top. Miss Greer's evidence was much the same. According to her, Mr. Crail said, "Do try and be reasonable about this, Caroline. I'm fond of you and will always wish you well, you and the child, but I'm going to marry Elsa. We've always agreed to leave each other free." Miss Crail answered to that, "Very well, don't say I haven't warned you." He said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I mean that I love you and I'm not going to lose you. I'd rather kill you than let you go to that girl." And allegedly, this conversation is happening after when the whole, like, I'm gonna marry you is said in front of Caroline. Actually, Mr. Crail didn't really get all confrontational and kind of just grumbled and went off on his own without getting too confrontational, which to me signals a disagreement possibly in how he behaves as a character. It actually seems when the argument was at its heat, he backed down and walked away, not wanting to deal with this, and actually yelled at Elsa for a moment. But then fast forward, and he's alone with his wife, Caroline, saying like, it is going to happen. I both truly will be with this thou woman. Doesn't line up. There is a bunch re-emphasized in this time, though, that once again does not make Caroline look innocent. The whole timing with the beer, we have the police detective actually go through the movements of the house as he best could recall, and there was a point where Caroline is alone with the beer he's poisoned with while her husband is actively painting his affair partner and their backs are turned. There's agreement to this from the witness Elsa Greer, where she could have easily bloop scoop badooped and done the poison. When all of this is gone over, there is one person whose movements are not tracked as well. And in fact, Agatha Christie puts in something I believe to possibly distract the reader, because we don't know what Angela Warren is doing, but we know a couple of people were discussing her going to school. Now, audience, let me put something forward. There's Meredith Blake, the poisoner, who maybe believably did just show his friends like, look, there's this poison I have. Isn't that cool? I've seen people do stupid stuff and ended up getting censured from the court. If we looked at the aftermath of this, it was bad for him and he didn't gain much. So him working with Elsa actually kind of falls apart, though I'm not fully discounting it. Maybe he was in love with her, could have been a secondary affair thing. Who knows? We know she has 3 divorces. Though, what if Angela Warren, the supposedly abused younger sister, we're actually told has been spoiled by Caroline, who's felt horrible about disfiguring her younger sister and treats her incredibly well. After the trial, we've seen that Angela went off on her own and traveled the world, even became a successful speaker. What if it was guilt? Why would Caroline not defend herself in court? Why would she basically fall apart? To cover for her younger sister who saw this jackass of a husband flaunting his side piece and planning to marry her, embarrassing her sister that looked out for her. Angela knew of the poison. And why would Caroline suddenly start blurting things out like, I stole it, I'm the one who stole it. And then people say, well, you killed your husband? And I can't say that, I didn't do that, I stole it. It lines up so well. So we have this big, bold hussy who sucks Elsa Greer, following in the pattern of unlikable characters who potentially could be the killer, but there's no motivation. He was gonna marry her. He was setting himself up to be with her. And then we have the younger sister. And the younger sister doing it actually doesn't rule out Elsa just being a bit of a bad person and at the trial possibly making up additional false testimony because it said she really did want Caroline to hang for this. Caroline ended up getting ruled mercy, so it's just in prison for life. I have never felt more like a successful Sherlock Holmes. I think I managed to fit all of the pieces in place. And I'm only like a third of the way through the book, but I'm, for the first time, locking it in? I think I'm going to lock it in. It's a really good theory. Even if it turns out not to be true, I'm proud of this one. I think it lines up. I think it would make a good story, and it accounts for pretty much everything we've seen. Angela poisons the husband who's ruining her sister's life. Caroline finds out about it, and taking control of this younger, meeker sister, covers up for her, agrees to go to prison, but can't handle the idea of her daughter believing her mom is a killer. And so she then, at the last minute deathbed confession, is actually signaling to her daughter, I didn't do it. But she can't name the killer because it's her younger sister. And so the end of this book is going to be Poirot finding all of this out, telling the truth to the girl who came to him seeking the truth, but they can't bring it to the police. Or maybe they do. I'm not sure yet. If that turns out to be it, y'all, give me an A+ and a 5-star rating. I'm psyched, and I'm so proud I'm locking it in. Let's see what happens next. The first profile.
1 hour later.
I'm afraid this video might not be as interesting anymore because of how confident I am after meeting our first little piggy that I clocked this goddamn mystery. So, piggy number 1 who went to the market is Philip Blake, who has made quite the living as a stock trader. He is a wealthy man that Poirot meets after finishing 18 holes of golf. And apparently this has put him in a good mood. I, quite frankly, cannot relate. I've played 18 holes of golf twice in my life, and by the end of both times, I was in a bad mood. Not my game. But I need to include the details here that could be important later. This isn't me communicating this to you. Please, for the love of God, keep that in mind. This is Agatha Christie letting you know that Philip, in his years, has become a little bit of a chunker. And this is important for the whole psychology thing because it's conveyed to us through Poirot's POV that him being a bit more of a rotund guy shows that he possibly doesn't have a ton of regrets, he's content, and there's just a ton communicated to us, not with direct evidence, but instead just the way we're observing the demeanor of Philip Blake to let us know the market piggy who was the best friend character, not our killer. And I'm again gonna lock that in. I really think I maybe got this one early on, and I'm nervous about that. But yeah, he is rich, and Poirot does not want to tell him that he's actually collecting all this information to possibly, accuse him of murder, because just because I believe that doesn't mean that Poirot does. So he says instead he's writing a book about this old sex-filled crime that he thinks will sell quite well, which of course our capitalist friend totally believes. And then we really get into the psychology of Philip Blake, and more of this points towards him not being guilty. Don't get me wrong, Agatha Christie does put forth a motive that could result in Philip Blake trying to get Caroline thrown in jail, and that would be that he f***ing hates her. And he claims he always hated Caroline, but to me, this comes across like a disliking he held for his best friend's wife that over the years after this murder she was found guilty of has festered into all-out hatred. Because we get a moment where he's coming across friendly and even kind of okay with talking with Poirot about the case, but as soon as it comes to talking about the character of Caroline, he does one of those Bilbo reaching for the rings when Frodo shows him it moments. Just And then he rants in this unhealthy way about how much he hated Caroline and thought she was just terrible. He even gives a slightly different version of the story where she scarred her younger sister, saying that she bashed the baby with a crowbar, which I don't think lines up with what we heard before and sounds a lot worse, but I'm inclined to think he just has a worse version of this story saved in his memory card because, you know, he's been just festering, just lots and lots of festering. But he also feels guilt, not the variety that makes me think he did it, but instead says, it's my fault. Why? Well, apparently Meredith, his brother, reported hours before the poisoning took place to Philip that the poison was missing. And instead of going straight to the police or, you know, trying to confront Caroline, instead he delayed and was trying to figure out with his brother what the best thing to do was. And so he says it basically like he should have called 911, should have intervened, and there's a lot of guilt weighing on him. So possibly, I mean, he killed his best friend to get this woman he hated thrown in jail, but that doesn't really add up at all. It's a 1 out of 10 in terms of Philip Blake being the killer, and I just don't think we have any good reason to think his hate actually falls into that kind of murderous intent. But when the topic shifts to Elsa Greer, we get an interesting tiddly little bit. He says that Elsa Greer also had an unhealthy attitudes towards Amyas, the painter, and that she really wanted to own him, which aligns with what we've seen from multiple witnesses being able to testify, where she literally came into this house and was like, I'm going to redecorate and make it mine. Woman, what? And on top of that, apparently our famous painter fella was flitting with his affair partners, and he would go from one to another and another. Perhaps that means after Elsa Greer did this big marriage showcasing where she was trying to basically get Caroline to leave or freak out or frame her potentially, after seeing that immature behavior, maybe Amyas decided, "Ner, I'm not going to leave my wife for you." And then that one testimony that Elsa Greer was able to give about hearing basically Caroline triple down to a cartoonish degree about murdering her husband was false. And what Elsa actually overheard was, in reality, basically, her whole affair being undone and Amyas deciding to leave her. Is that the case? Possibly. It does line up with quite a bit of things. The timing of getting the poisoning before that conversation would even take place isn't necessarily there. And we do know that Caroline did pick up that poison because she admitted to it, allegedly. Though, what I actually believe comes next, because again, we actually had no mention of Angela, the disfigured younger sister here. And that made me go, oh, we're not even hinting towards her. So possibly, they turned the page and there was. They started talking about Angela. And we get some additional details because apparently Angela did not get along with Amyas. In fact, he tried to be the disciplinarian at times, and she was always playing tricks, like putting slugs in his bed, and resented the fact that he was trying to have her sent off to school, though she didn't hate school itself, so I don't think that's murder motivation. But in terms of a problem child who possibly did not fully understand the ramifications of the poison that was laying around the house, or potentially she picked up out of curiosity, putting it in the drink of a guy you're upset with for arguing with your older sister who spoils you, that lines up. And so I was like, oh, okay, maybe Elsa Greer, there's going to be, nope, filling this in. I'm so sure it's Angela, guys. I don't feel like it's a smart move to be this confident less than halfway in, but it's so poetic in how it would have unfurled and justifies all of Caroline's behavior on trial, which, again, we have a rant from Philip about, where he's basically saying like, oh, the woman you saw on trial doesn't align with the Caroline I knew who was vindictive and mean. Why wouldn't she be that on trial? Because she's covering for her younger sister. But the bit ends, before we move on to our next piggy, with Poirot asking Philip to write down his full recounting of events, the best of his memory, and he says that he doesn't want just a raw statement of facts. He wants the best he can do of the events of the day with the psychological angles he recalls of the people. The final thing I'll say towards this that I really do think lines up is if you're going to do this structured poem off the nursery rhyme of the 5 little pigs, the one who cried wee, wee, wee all the way home is Angela, the last pig. And if you're going to do the denouement, where it's the reveal that the younger sister actually did it and we can't turn her into the police because she was just a kid at the time and didn't understand, that's... I'm just feeling good about this. I hope it's not cheating that I'm also taking things into account, like... I don't know, it just structurally bends that way. And if you look at the setup of the profiles, having the last one, it all lines up and makes sense. Maybe things will change at the next one, because if we're looking at the order of the poem, the one who stayed home, from what we were told before, is Meredith. And so we will now be talking to profile number 2, the Poison Creator.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
This was an exquisite chapter. It begins with a showcasing, just clearly for us, the reader, of why Poirot is one of the GOAT detectives in all of literature, fiction, imagination. Because we subtly get shown how he manipulates people, how he gets what he wants, without ever quite crossing the line into being a bad person, but absolutely being manipulative, because that's his job. Like, there is a truth to being a good detective. You have to be manipulative to get what you want, to find the secrets that maybe people aren't even intentionally hiding from you. Anyway, he quickly deduces that Meredith Blake, the older, technically, brother who comes across younger of Philip Blake, is the type of fellow that he can't just approach out of the blue and tell exactly what's going on, and he needs introductions. So he reaches out to some people who he knows live near Meredith and brings letters from them, essentially encouraging Meredith to help Poirot with whatever he needs. When Poirot does eventually get to telling him that he's writing a book about this murder case, I actually found this a little bit endearing and agree with him. Meredith gets mad. Straight up's like, I don't like that. Bad people suck. But Poirot is able to say, it's not really me, man. I'm just filling a market gap. And also, this is so smart. They end up referencing Caroline II, the woman who actually has hired Poirot onto this. And Poirot actually admits that she's involved with why he is writing this. And despite her now being a full-ass grown woman, when Meredith starts referring to her as the child, Poirot just agrees and goes along with it, even though in like a paragraph previous, he had referred to her as a grown-ass woman. But if you're trying to emotionally manipulate this guy into opening up about some possible guilt or insight he has into the past, having him visualizing this child whose parents were taken from her is sure going to help. Bam! But it's not bad. Like, I don't think anything he did there is morally wrong. He's just letting this person who thinks of Caroline II still as a child think of her as a child, because it lets him do his job. Good detective, Poirot. Now we get some interesting knowledge, though, because Amyas, whatever you say the painter's name, I thought he was maybe just kind of a horn dog, bit of piece of shit.
Slick back hair, white bathing suit, sloppy steaks.
Now I think he's a full-on bag of it, because apparently Meredith had confronted Amyas, however you say his name, about his terrible behavior. And when he pointed out, hey, you're treating your wife horridly by bringing this woman you're having an affair with openly around in the house and like just taking an affair to a degree that I frankly never seen before in a book. The painter just responded, well, my wife has to lump it, and so does Elsa, who I'm also treating terribly. Dude. And of course, Meredith is extra predisposed to be mad about this because it's revealed that he loved Caroline, the first, not the daughter. That'd be really f***ed up to bring up. He actually wanted to marry Caroline at some point, and so he is officially now ruled out as a suspect, because if he loved Caroline, then obviously he would not have been involved with framing her for murder, which unfortunately blows my locked-in theory out of the water. I can no longer get an A this video. That sucks. He is not directly involved in the murder, and I'm willing to admit that. In fact, I think Meredith is the best person we've met so far in this story, and Poirot agrees and starts liking Meredith, and there are greater indications of that to come. But the final thing he mentions that really just shatters any I guess, reasonable doubt people could have had at the time that Caroline did do the murder, is he confirms that Caroline is the one who brought up the poison and mentioned it to him. And all the people were present at the time when he was giving a tour of his chemical facilities, except for Cecilia Williams, who is a character that's technically one of the piggies that is so rarely mentioned, I forgot she was one of the piggies. Sorry, Cecilia Williams, you're also not the killer, because you just haven't been relevant to the story. Every now and then there's a character the author just didn't have enough time for. That's true. Interesting insert here. We have, and I want to really emphasize that I went through like 3 different theories throughout this chapter. I know 100% the ending of this book, and I'm going to lock it the in. We'll get there. Don't ruin it. I have a really fun game that you and I, audience, are going to play. Meredith also agrees that Angela had a bit of an inclination to play with slugs and apparently dropped them on her father's back while he was painting, which made him blow up. And this is just kind of re-emphasizing for us that Amyas is hyper obsessed with his painting to the point where he would just spend hours and hours and hours laying in the sun, thinking, jumping up with inspiration, painting like a madman. Typical artist. But as much as Meredith agrees that he actually came to believe that Caroline did do it, he still thinks that Elsa is awful because he confronted Elsa as well about how terrible what she was doing was, and Elsa just kind of went, ha ha ha, I'm not old-fashioned, it's fine. So didn't like her, but despite her confidence and the other characteristics of supposed facades of being in control we've had noted from other characters to us about Elsa, Meredith found her a bit pathetic. Someone who would say things to justify their selfish actions, but in reality just was parroting shallow points without any deeper thought or nuance to them. And I find that to be a really endearing characteristic for Meredith. And at that point, I think we get to see Poirot as well start to respect Meredith's insights into this crime to a greater degree. And yes, this is going where you think it's going. Though, yeah, he's saying, I think Caroline did do it, except for when Poirot just basically pushes back with the equivalent of, did she? And Meredith really just is latching onto that, like, maybe not. I'd rather she didn't. So what are you saying? Because I love Caroline, and I don't want her to be the one. And also, Angela loved Caroline, and Caroline loved Angela. So is it Angela? I actually don't think so anymore. As much as that would be a tragic story that would explain a lot of Caroline's actions, I actually think my new who I think did it leaves me with more questions than answers. But on a thematic level, I now get what Agatha Christie was going for, and I don't think she could pass up this opportunity. We'll get there. Sorry, I'm excited, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Remember, I already failed this one, but I got a backup B theory that's rockin'. Really sad thing, though, we also hear that after this whole murder was done, Meredith gave up his potions and chemistry and stuff and decided to put it down because his carelessness resulted in someone dying. And it is now deeply important to me that at the end of this story, we get the note that Meredith doesn't feel bad anymore and starts practicing again. I truly hope that happens. And if it doesn't, I will be sincerely disappointed because it's so sad that this guy who really, like, yeah, he was kind of careless, but it's not entirely your fault, man. You trusted your friends, right? I don't know. I know people who take their friends out to shoot their guns and stuff all the time, and I don't see this as much more reckless than that. Anyway, the one thing we are left with, if we know Caroline didn't do it, who had a motive to do it? And this is reiterated at this point in the chapter, where it's like, who actually had a reason to kill this famous painter? Well, I might have something there. First, though, it is revealed to Meredith at this point that I need you to do a write-up. And you're not just doing it for me, you are doing it for Caroline, because Poirot basically tells Meredith the whole truth of like, I'm here for the daughter and I want to bring her the truth. And Meredith also says, I definitely don't think it was the unaliving of oneself theory. So this brings me to my theory. We get the information here that all the inheritance went to Caroline II, and her estate was sold. We actually even have Meredith take Poirot to the estate and show him where the murder happened. There's this place he would paint. It's got a gorgeous view and all this stuff. Okay. Actually, Meredith, was your lab not too far from here? No, it wasn't. So Poirot goes with Meredith to this lab. And it turns out Meredith bought the painting, the one that Amiel was working on of Elsa. And ooh, buddy, Poirot gets to have the sheet pulled down and gets to look at this final painting from this incredibly talented painter. And I am going to read from the text here because I think we get our answer. Oh, I actually at one point even thought in this chapter Angela was super doubled down for it to be the guilty verdict, because there was a part where Meredith was saying, do you think Elsa did it? Preposterous. She was going to marry him. Do you think I did it? That's crazy. Do you think my brother did it? He had no reason. Do you think Angela did it? And then he moves on without saying there's like a no to it. And I thought that was Agatha Christie giving us a little boop as the reader. But now I think that's a part of the whole Angela actually being built up as the red herring. I had it misidentified. And I now think Elsa Greer is the murderer because of what Poirot sees in the painting. Let's read it. Poirot caught his breath. He had seen so far 4 pictures of Amias Creils. 2 at the Tate, 1 at the London's Dealer, 1 the still life of the roses, but now he was looking at what the artist himself had called his best picture, and Poirot realized at once what a superb artist the man had been. The painting had an old, superficial smoothness. At first glance it might have been a poster, so seemingly crude were its contrasts. A girl in a canary yellow shirt and dark blue slacks sitting on a gray wall in full sunlight against a background of violet blue sea. Just the kind of subject for a poster. But the first appearance was deceptive. There was a subtle distortion, an amazing brilliance and clarity in the light. And the girl, yes, here was life. All there was, all there could be of life, of youth, of sheer blazing vitality. The face was alive and the eyes, so much life, such passion, youth. That, then, was what Amias Creil had seen in Elsa Greer, which had made him blind and deaf to the gentle creature, his wife. Elsa was life. Elsa was youth. A superb, slim, straight creature, arrogant, her head turned, her eyes insolent with triumph, looking at you, watching you, waiting. Hercule Poirot spread out his hands. He said, "It is great, yes, it is great." Meredith Blake said, with a catch in his voice, "She was so young." Poirot nodded. He thought to himself, what do most people mean when they say that? So young. Something innocent, something appealing, something helpless. But youth is not that. Youth is crude. Youth is strong. Youth is powerful. Yes, and cruel. And one thing more, youth is vulnerable. He followed his host to the door. His interest was quickened now in Elsa Greer, whom he was to visit next. What would the years have done to that passionate, triumphant, crude child? He looked back at the picture. Those eyes watching him, telling him something he couldn't understand. What were they telling him? Would the real woman be able to tell him? Or were those eyes saying something that the real woman did not know? Such arrogance, such triumphant anticipation. And then death had stepped in and taken the prey out of those eager, clutching young hands. And the light had gone out of those passionately anticipating eyes. What were the eyes of Elsa Greer like now? He went out of the room with one last look. He thought, she was too much alive. He felt a little frightened. Okay. Did you get it? Did you pick it up? Did you see how everything is spelled out for us so clearly? Now, the board behind me looks a very specific way. It's going to be erased. So you know later in the video, when you see me declare exactly what happened and what Agatha Christie just did for us, you know I found it at this point in the book, and that is my new theory locked in. I am also going to write something in this gray page of this notebook. It's the only gray page in the notebook, so you know I can't change my answer later on. I'll write it now. I will not touch that notebook again. I'm going to take my little David face and even put it there. You can do a frame by frame and see it doesn't move unless I knock it by accident. And now I will state exactly what just happened and how we were supposed to take it versus what's the truth. And we will splice this in at the end, starting now. That was it. That was my saved, I called it incredible moment from Agatha Christie. 10 out of 10. And for sure, I am, now that my last lock-in has been blown up and I can't get an A, locking in a new a new lock-in that Elsa Greer did it on her own. I just don't know why yet.
Later that night.
Hi, it's evening now, and y'all, this did it. I'm sorry. Agatha Christie didn't even write a murder mystery. She decided in the middle of Poirot's career to just have him come across as stark raving psychopath and realize the unbelievable amount of damage she's done to these people's lives. And I mean that quite genuinely. There are so many overt things being put on the page to let us know that Elsa Greer died alongside our painter, and this new evolved monster, Elsa, came out. And yeah, I genuinely think, like, this is not a joke, Agatha Christie's intent was for all of us to know at this point, and the tragedy of Five Little Pigs is going to be marinating in the grief of this psycho's actions. How far am I willing to take that? I'm not technically 100% sure, but I will say this is a quite great book if it turns out to be the case. And if it doesn't, then Agatha Christie has set up what would be too much of a red herring. This isn't, a whodunit. It's the equivalent of the scene in Seven where Kevin Spacey walks in with blood covering his hands and goes, "Detective! You're looking for me!" But not quite. It's also one of the shortest parts because I feel like Agatha Christie actually got to a point with Elsa Greer where she goes, "You get it. We all get it. Let's just figure out how and why she did it from here," which I still have to guess because I don't think I've said this yet in this video. But for me to get a perfect grade, which I already can't, I need to get the who, what, where, when, and why correct. And I guess at the end of this section, I will fill those out. But yes, she is a fucking psycho and killed the man she was having an affair with, possibly for sport. The why is what I'm still struggling with. But I should have remembered that Agatha Christie likes to make people who are unlikable the killers, and pretty much everyone else has been kind of likable. This is the worst woman. So Poirot arrives at Elsa Greer's house, now going by Elsa. I'm just going to call her Demon. And first meets her husband, who keeps thinking, like, I have to look out for my dear wife, because apparently he can't see that he actually just has raving Gollum as his wife. No, not delicate little Smeagol, though she does kind of revert to that at one point, but the murderous Gollum. Her house is gaudy and gross, and after Poirot easily gets past the husband's like brief scrutiny, he ends up seeing Elsa, who he notes is still young, just 36, and a beautiful woman. And as someone in my 30s, Poirot is a wise man. I trust him entirely when he says that people 36 are young. I appreciate you. And this is where Agatha Christie begins signaling to any reader paying attention, the murder mystery is done now, and we know who the killer is. Because Juliet has been referenced in regards to Elsa and Amis's relationship, Romeo and Juliet. And throughout this chapter, when he sees this woman who is no longer like the girl in the painting, but instead evolved into something colder and darker, he says, Elsa Greer died that day. Now, how did Romeo and Juliet die, dear reader/viewer? Poison! Spoilers for Shakespeare. And so, fitting that full metaphor here in the book, Elsa Greer died when she had her first kill. And now she has come back as this darker thing. Poirot even refers to her eyes as gray dead lakes. Oh, and by the way, she refers to being on trial and giving testimony against Caroline as something she enjoyed doing. I enjoyed it. And when she talks about seducing a married man, she says, I took him. And yeah, she's wealthy now and has done all this stuff and devolves into telling Poirot about her life philosophy of take what you want. There's only one life and then move on if things go poorly. Pay the price and continue forth. That's a psychopath. Like actually a fucking psychopath. And when Poirot, kind of for the opposite motivation of Meredith, where he liked the guy, told him the truth about Caroline, he tells Elsa the truth about Caroline hiring him, and I imagine it's so he can gauge just how insane she is. And not only is Elsa like, oh yeah, I guess there was a child involved in this murder. What? If there's a child involved with the murder of a person you know, that's probably the person who's going to stick out the most in your head. Unless you're crazy. Looking out for the child after its parents die or where anyone's brain's going to go. But then she refers to the child as stupid for trying to dig all this up. And also, Elsa wants to talk shit about everyone. Meredith, Philip, talking about how, oh, Meredith just followed around Caroline, desperate for her attention, just shitting on these people who are still, everyone else, covered in grief. If she's not the murderer, this is a bad book, because now I want her to be. If she's free at the end of this book, I'm unsatisfied. I genuinely, I want to emphasize this. I don't think Agatha Christie is presenting this as a murder mystery anymore. Full stop. Because at the very end of the chapter, Poirot literally looks at her and goes, this is Juliet, but still alive. You know, the poisoner. So it's also the reason the board's not very full, it's like the shortest interview because Poirot meets her and I imagine internally is like, oh, all right, solved. So now for the rest of the interviews, I guess we're going to try to put together the rest of the details and figure out exactly how and why she did it. But she's so evil, I would accept as an answer
for the sport of it.
And earlier, we've actually talked about a couple times in this book how English people like the sport of things. So she could be a serial killer. This could be another Napoleon Bonaparte cussed thing from the last one. You're a bad person. All right, let's get into it. Who? I actually think Elsa alone. What? She killed the painter. Where? Okay, I'm actually... it. Let's just open it. What I wrote here, because it's just obvious now. Watching her victim die because she was getting off on watching the man she poisoned die in front of her, painting her for vanity. Hence why she looked triumphant, seeing him slowly succumb to what she put in his beer. So that's the where, the painting session. The when, I mean, that's the when too. And the why? I actually think because Psycho, she got off on being on the stand and had no thought for the child after. Done. We're done. It's you. I probably, for viewer time and everything, should have kept that notebook reading till the end, but just keep watching to see if I'm somehow the most wrong I have ever been, starting with just 2 more Piggy interviews. And then I think we get to read their reports if I looked at the table of contents, and then the denouement. Oh, forgot to mention when she goes full Gollum mode and shows how she essentially cast a spell on our painter victim, where she whirled across the room. She was unlocking a little desk, pulling out a drawer concealed inside a pigeonhole. Then she was back In her hand was a creased letter. The ink faded. She thrust it on him, and Poirot had a sudden poignant memory of a child he had known, who had thrust on him one of her treasures, a special shell picked up on the seashore and jealously guarded. Just so had the child stood back and watched him, proud, afraid, keenly critical of his reception of her treasure. He unfolded the faded sheets. Elsa, you wonderful child, there was never anything as beautiful, and yet I am afraid. I'm too old, a middle-aged, ugly-tempered devil, with no stability in me. Don't trust me, don't believe me, I'm no good, apart from my work. The best of me is in it. There, don't say you haven't been warned. Hell, my lovely, I'm going to have you all the same. I'm going to the devil for you, and you know it. And I'll paint a picture of you that will make the fat-headed world hold its sighs and gasp. I'm crazy about you. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Elsa, Elsa, Elsa. I'm yours forever. Yours till death. Amias.
I just had a realization reading that. We got the why. He's already showing second thoughts. So my prediction, I think, earlier was right, where that testimony that Elsa gave about hearing him, like, awkwardly triple down on her was probably him actually being like, no, I'm gonna go back with my wife and screw this psycho who just talked about me leaving my wife in front of my friends and my wife and maybe my child. So that's the why. The why is he was gonna leave her, and Amyas recognized her as a demon woman, and that all kind of wraps it up. Wait, oh no, the poison! Caroline's still the one who got the poison. Could Elsa have somehow planted the idea of poison? That's the one myth left. How did she know Elsa took the poison and then think to use it? It had to be a moment of opportunity. She had to have seen Caroline take the poison. I think I said Elsa earlier, I meant Caroline. And then realized she had an opportunity and took advantage of it. I'm betting all the marbles on it. I'm really thinking I got this nailed down. So let's see if I can prove it.
A few moments later.
I have one severe complaint with this book so far. It's pretending we all don't know who did this thing. And I'm sorry, we know who did this thing. These next couple of characters kind of throw us other paths to go on, but in terms of Agatha Christie's typical red herrings and ulterior motives, they feel almost half-hearted. And I still maintain, I don't think this is supposed to be a murder mystery at this point. If I'm wrong, I'll be very embarrassed, but I'm pretty darn sure I'm right. But I combined the next two little piggies because, frankly, they give pretty recountings in terms of their insight, though there are a few interesting nuggets. First, we have possibly my favorite late introduction getting the characterization of a person, and that is Miss Williams, the governess and good friend of Caroline and caretaker of Angela when she was a schoolgirl. First of all, she right away is telling Poirot Angela is a great woman still to this day. Fabulous. She's successful, she's moved on, and she's done wonderful things with her life. Do not think anything bad about Angela. And there are many reasons why I should have never thought anything bad about Angela if I actually knew Agatha Christie as well as I thought I did going into this material. I've reevaluated, I've learned, and I've grown. Moving on. She also emphasizes, and I want you to really take this to heart, that Elsa Greer is the King devil.
She's the devil.
She says this woman was a wretch and did horrible things, and this isn't going where you actually think it's going. In fact, this interview ends in a place that, quite frankly, left me gobsmacked. Speaking of things that smacked my gob, we also have Miss Williams saying that Amyas deserved to die due to the abuse he put his wife through, and he was a shitty artist. Which, all right, that's maybe a bit of an indication that her hatred's going a little too far, or she's not 100% reliable, because even Poirot has been very impressed by Amyas's paintings, and he was successful. It's kind of verging into the territory of like people who say, oh, Billie Eilish is a shit pop star. And it's like, you're just saying that because she's really famous and popular. Billie Eilish is like objectively a pretty great pop star. We do get additional details from the crime scene, like how Elsa, apparently right when the body was found, started screaming with rage, saying, "Caroline, you killed him! You did it! It's you!" You know, like how someone who was setting someone else up for murder and was cocky and dumb would do. But Williams also says, "I don't think it be the side of Sue," and actually ends her conversation with Poirot after agreeing, like everyone else has, to write him a letter, the recounting of events. She says, "I should have told you this earlier. I know for a fact that Caroline was guilty and did kill her husband." Y'all, I don't know. Like, Agatha Christie, nice try. I don't buy that for 2 seconds. When I read it, I had a beat of, and then I exhaled that gasp, and that feeling left me. Nice job with your attempted herring, but it's not even red. This is a dead in the water, not tempting herring at all. We don't know why she thinks that because we're being held off to read the letter later, but we get a snidge. There's one other brief thing that I want to read from this book that's just kind of apropos, you could say, to things going on in the world. And it's the mention of a name, real quick, that I thought was, you know, just kind of noteworthy, if anything. When talking about Amyas's art, Poirot and Williams have a back and forth where it said, "Don't ask me to admire Mr. Crayle's paintings. 2 of them are in the Taint Gallery," Poirot reminded her. Miss Williams snuffed. "Possibly. So is one of Mr. Epstein's statues, I believe." Yeah, if Epstein has a statue there, I don't want to go there. I love that there's an artist who's apparently terrible, and Williams is calling them out like, "I don't want to, that's a bad artist. You don't want to be next to them." It's like the last name Weinstein. It's just like, yep, I don't want that name. But this takes us to, frankly, the most interesting interview to date, outside of when Poirot sat down across from a psycho who definitely murdered a painter. And that's because we finally meet my original suspect A, Angela Warren. And I actually want to apologize for so eagerly and early, often in these videos, cockily locking in an answer that inevitably I'm wrong on and have to pivot. I will restrain myself more in the future. I get that's probably annoying, and I want to sincerely apologize. And let's get to Angela, because all the hype this woman has had lived up to. Angela is a boss. Not only is she, yes, disfigured, but she has not let it hold her back even a bit in life, because Poirot actually attends one of her lectures. That's right, she's lecturing about her travels and extraordinary existence as a woman, and says that she's got a big brain. This is a woman who can speak publicly and with nuance and intelligence about what she's learned about the world. And this book actually goes on to have pages of praise about Poirot's impression of Angela. And we get even more so because, yes, it gets into her disfigurement and this scar that runs through her eye, but it's not really even painted a negative light by Agatha Christie. And this is what I'm saying when I should have known better when it comes to Ags Chris and how she views people, because she has been sympathetic towards those that are normally marginalized by society. Hence Bonaparte cussed in the last mystery we did. Someone who, yeah, was going through a lot, but through the lens of Agatha Christie was in many ways a result of exploitation. And I won't say anything more than that to not spoil that book. But we get a similar sympathetic view here, but instead of kind of having this soft, comforting, "oh, poor woman," instead Agatha Christie paints Angela as like baller, because she also is told just immediately the whole truth by Poirot, because why would you not say the truth to this big brain who would probably see through any lies about Carla. Angela's just like, I've actually had like exchange communications with her occasionally. I wish I had more, but you know, I was in Cairo and shit and my life's amazing. If she's here, I'd like to talk to her. And it became very important to me right away that these two get a wholesome moment before the book is done. Both Meredith better start cooking up meth in his lab again, and also these two stepsisters, whatever, need to have a wholesome, just great time. We also get from Angela the fact that no. Forget Miss Williams, who, by the way, is straight up giving the vibe of, oh yeah, I think Amyas deserved to die, but if I had done it, I would have admitted it to save Caroline, and I also would have on the stand said, and I'd do it again. But, she didn't do it. But ignore her. She may be a great woman, but she's wrong when she says guilty, and instead pay attention here to this not guilty. Angela says, with great confidence, Caroline could not physically have done it. Why? Look at me. She almost killed me in a fit of rage. And she was a good woman. When she was young, that guilt stuck with her forever. Yes, she was prone to saying, I'll kill you and violent things. But as we've all seen with recent celebrities who come across as way too wholesome, then turn out to be Bill fucking Cosby, violent words do not equal violence, just as a wholesome person who doesn't like to say bad words equals good individual. A lot of the times I've actually found in my life, the more someone's willing to say fuck, that's actually them kind of healthily expressing their frustration and not going home and beating their dog or something. Anyway, this brings us to what I find to be a truly poetic revelation. That means the disfigured eye, the scar, is actually allowing us to see the truth of the matter. We are seeing the truth through the scar, and that is that Caroline could never kill someone. She is just far too lesson learned from accidentally almost killing the sister that she loves dearly and spoiled, and that was carried with her, this immense feeling. And her and her husband kind of got off on all of the arguing. They were one of those messy couples where it was like their spats back and forth. And so the idea that she would kill Amyas is crazy. Poirot, though, come with me. And Angela takes him to a room and shows him a painting of Caroline. And it's the first time Poirot has actually been able to see this woman, and he sees a good woman. And this is a continued theme in this book that I really like. Truth through art. Several different times we have seen like roses that kind of represented Amyas himself. We've seen that obvious painting of Elsa where she's a triumphant killer, in my opinion. And now we see the humble Caroline. And through that art, we see this innocence, but she didn't just bring Poirot in this room to show him this art. She also reads him a secret letter that Caroline wrote to Angela after her conviction. And it reads, "My darling little Angela, you will hear bad news and you will grieve, but what I want to impress upon you is that it is all right. I have never told you lies, and I don't now when I say that I am actually happy, that I feel an essential rightness and a peace that I have never known before. It's all right, darling, it's all right. Don't look back and regret and grieve for me. Go on with your life and succeed. You can, I know. It's all right, darling, and I'm going to Amyas. I haven't the least doubt that we shall be together. I couldn't have lived without him. Do this one thing for me. Be happy. I've told you I'm happy. One has to pay one's debts. It's lovely to feel peace. It's lovely to feel peace. Your loving sister, Carol." Goosebumps. Goosebumps! And then this section is ended with another, half-hearted herring where Angela says, "Maybe Philip Blake was having an affair with Caroline. I saw him leaving her room once." Agatha Christie, stop taking dead red-colored herrings and flopping them on my boat. I'm kicking them off. We know who the killer is. Cut that shit out. The poetry in this, the beauty in that, the theme of art being the portal to truth and seeing reality in this disfigured eye that actually is within such a beautiful woman, and all of this subjective beauty in the art in the eye of the beholder, which even kind of plays into Miss Williams saying he's a shit artist. And this woman is the art. This woman who receives so much praise and is disfigured and could have been so just lost in life, but conquered it all. That's the masterpiece. Now I have to read the recountings. And audience, I am going to read all of them before I record again. And I'm going to draw my trying to piece together, after going through everyone's counting of events, the truth of exactly how Elsa Greer did it. And I hope that you at least give me a somewhat okay grade in the comments down below if I nail all the pieces. That being said, this is maybe the most I have not emotionally connected with or been wowed by Agatha Christie's endeavors, but in terms of seeing almost like a pattern, the art, the characters, the reveal. I don't think this is meant to even be a murder mystery at its soul. It's something else. It's a psychological endeavor. It's truly what it said at the start. It's a look at profiles, but instead of being this great mystery like And Then There Were None was, it's how one devil can just decimate so many lives. And for Caroline, I'm now going to try and figure out exactly how she did it.
3:28 a.m.
All right. I just read through everyone's recounting, and I figured it would be a little boring for you all to have the same day walked through 5 times and me explain it. So instead, I've condensed down what I think Elsa Greer's actions were throughout the weekend of murder based on her own testimony, which I think was fairly obviously largely bullshit, and the contradictions between her testimony and what others said. Granted, I could also write this version of this board to also have suspicion towards Angela. I know, but there is, I would say, a 0.00001% chance Angela actually did this, and Agatha Christie has cast a wonderful spell over me, but I'm 99.9999% sure I actually kicked this thing's ass. Let's get into it. Walking you through the weekend of murder actually starts with a series of statements that were said before that weekend ever occurred. And that is composed of Philip testifying that Amyas had said that to him, well, Elsa was just a girl. Oh, that doesn't seem like this obsessed freak is actually going to be running away with this woman forever. Now, does it? Oh, I'm sorry. Not woman. Girl. Then we have Meredith comforting Caroline about this new obsession of her husband's and saying they don't last, in reference to all the different partners that Amyas has had over the years. And then actually there's one thing that's not even a quote and is the only thing I really truly believe that is like independent testimony from Elsa's statement herself. And I think it's quite funny. She's giving herself away when, you know, Angela has repeatedly said that even as a child, she recognized that Elsa was stupid. And she admits she was actually paying for this painting to be done, truly weaseling her way in. Now, I do believe it is true that once the painting was started, Amyas did become somewhat obsessed with Elsa. Truly, he did. And it was a physical fling. But he also, in Elsa's own testimony, again, warns her about the type of man he is, and that he's going to basically use her and discard her, sleep with her, and that he's married. And he also says he loves his wife. So that is the setup for Elsa actually getting one hell of a reality smack and handling it in the psychotic way. Because you see, Elsa comes to the house and is clearly infatuated with this famous painter. She is paid to paint her, and it's actually apparently turning out to be one of his best pieces ever, to the point where he's not obsessed necessarily with Elsa, but instead he's obsessed with getting this painting done and is saying whatever he needs to Elsa to keep her in line and coming back to pose. And we even see there are multiple witnesses who say he's like yelling at Elsa at multiple points to stay still so I can get this painting done. And she keeps getting slighted by Caroline throughout the weekend. Rather understandably. This leads to a conflict where, as we've seen from multiple different testimonies, including Philip's, that, well, Elsa claimed that Amyas promised to marry her. I think he did that to get her here this weekend so he could finish the painting he think would be the best of his career, the one that took Poirot's breath away. And, not wanting to ruin this weekend, Amyas says yes, and there's a couple different kind of conflicting testimonies about how he said this. I am most inclined to believe his best friend Philip and the governess saying that it just seemed kind of meek or something, and I think he is essentially basically prioritizing his painting over his marriage because he sucks. And he's saying yes to this claim in front of his wife and friends, throwing his wife under the bus because he doesn't respect her much. And this results in people being able to actually testify that apparently he was legitimately planning to leave his wife. But yes, dear viewer, I don't think he actually was at any point. And this continues on into the next big stage, because now Caroline actually believes her husband is going to leave her and has demonstrated these insecurities to the point where, yeah, she was even talking to Meredith before about how she thinks this girl might be different. And Meredith had to reassure her, no, it's not. He's just having another affair partner. But distraught and now believing it because of this doubling down, when Meredith tells everyone about these damn poisons, Caroline takes it. But she doesn't take it to murder anybody, because we have seen her say these violent things, but we've also heard her say she can't live without her husband. And so she got it for herself. But when she snatched it, and this, I'm not sure yet when or how this happened, but for this to work, Elsa had to have seen her do it. And this puts Elsa on high alert, because she just saw the wife of the man she's trying to steal grab poison, and she doesn't know for sure she's using it on herself, and so she starts snooping around. And this leads us to the next day, because yes, I do want to point out, this is the most awkward weekend ever. Not only was there an admittance of a divorce coming followed by tea time at Meredith's house, what? But they all then go to bed. Which is, okay, Agatha Christie, I don't know what kind of weekends you're having, but okay. The next morning, this is where Elsa's story really falls apart, because we have direct contradictions. 3 different testimonies from reliable people of Caroline saying, "You're women," to her husband, being overheard by Philip as they're arguing in the library. And then also, "too cruel." Meredith overhears Caroline whispering that to herself. Later, though, Philip sees that the end of this argument between Caroline and Amyas is overheard by Elsa, who is eavesdropping at the library because she's on high alert. Outside the library. Now, in her own testimony, Elsa says that at the very end of what she was eavesdropping on, before Philip caught her eavesdropping, she heard, violently threatened from Caroline to Amyas that she was going to kill him if Amyas left her for Elsa. But I don't think that actually happened. I think what actually happened, and what caused her to say "too cruel" later, is Elsa overheard, because Amyas had found his wife had taken poison to kill herself, him reassure his wife, "No, I'm not going to leave you for this girl who's not going to last and is paying me for this painting. And I'm telling her all this stuff just to keep her around so this masterpiece can be on display." Which, of course, his wife is like, "What the f***? That's too cruel," right? And we even see there's a physical confrontation later where she tackles her husband. Caroline, bit of a boss. When Philip catches Elsa eavesdropping at the library, he specifically notes she's happy and like, ha 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 ha, up to him when she walks away from the library window. If she just heard Caroline threaten to kill the man she loves, why would she be happy? That's messed up. Or she heard something that would upset her, but seeing Philip catch her puts on this like, "Everything's great, Philip. You're not going to suspect me of murder now that I know there's poison in the house." Around this time is when Meredith notices his poison is missing, and we see that Caroline goes to tackle her husband. The house largely empty. Elsa is later seen leaving the house. Oh, that means she was alone with the poison. I don't know, though, how she could have gotten a hold of it without putting in her fingerprints, although that really could just be as simple as handling it with a towel. This is my question. I don't know how Elsa did the poisoning, and I know that's a big gap. That's a big hole. We also have a rather strange choice from Agatha Christie, because while Elsa, in my theory, is running around with the poison, dripping it, dropping it, we see that Meredith, noticing his poison's missing, calls his brother and is like, we have an emergency, poison missing. I think Caroline or Elsa may have taken it. Big problem. And he goes to the estate where everyone is, and Philip meets him. And you'd think they're going to immediately gather everyone up and say, the poison has been taken. But instead, they just hang around for a while and are like, I don't know what to do, man. I don't want to start accusing our friends. And then Angela asks Philip to go sunbathing with him, and he does. There's poison! What? Philip, I don't think he's a killer, but he is for sure an idiot, and Meredith doesn't do anything at this point. Guys, poison and angry whip. Really? Except, during this point, we do know the poisoning occurs because Meredith, nervous, goes off walking, and he ends up watching from a slight distance Elsa being painted by Amyas. And he overhears some strange snippets of conversation, including this exchange right before the painting is complete. They don't talk very much, of course. No painter wants to be chattering when he is working. Perhaps every 10 minutes or so, Elsa would make an observation, and Amyas would grunt and reply. Once she said, I think you're right about Spain. That's the first place we'll go. And you must take me to see a bullfight. It must be wonderful. Only, I'd like the bull to kill the man, not the other way about. I understand how Roman women felt when they saw a man die. Men aren't much, but animals are splendid. Agatha Christie, if I'm somehow wrong, and Elsa's not the killer, you've just made the most random psychopath in the history of fiction. This woman is sitting here watching a poisoned man die, talking about how animals are splendid, but men aren't much, and I understood how the Roman women felt. Amya starts making some weird grunting noises at this point that Meredith takes as him just kind of being obsessively into his painting, but in context, we know he's dying. They go off to lunch, and this is when, after the beer has been brought down, the murder has occurred because Caroline and Williams are going to check on her husband, and that is when alarms are raised, and Williams is sent back at first to get someone to raise the alarm. She runs into Meredith and tells him to call the police before heading back down to see what Caroline is doing. And this is when she gets her evidence to make her 100% certain that Caroline is the killer, because she comes back and she sees Caroline taking the beer glass and wiping it for prints and planting her husband's prints. And that is why, audience, I've pulled a hell of a little over you, because that's right. Caroline did it. Elsa is innocent. And you, like me, have been let... No, I'm kidding. Of course not. Are you high? This is a big question, though. I don't know why this occurred. This is another thing where it's like, if I had to guess, she sees her husband's been poisoned, knows she brought the glass down, and in a fit of panic is trying to not make it look like she poisoned him, but maybe thinks, oh, it's a suicide. He did it to himself now that his masterpiece is complete. Except that I'm really confused by that. This part, I still... but we don't have to focus on that, because needing to maintain her facade of I sure didn't do this, Elsa, hearing of the murder in the ruckus, claims she thinks that for some reason Caroline stabbed or shot her husband, something like that, and comes down and starts trying to fight Caroline, trying to kill her for killing the man I want to marry. Good good show. Except, really quickly, the governess Williams gets it under control and notes in her testimony that Elsa kind of calms down real fast. Almost like it was a performance. Here, though, is where I'm really trying to connect the last couple of dots. Because Caroline is, of course, arrested. Philip even accuses her to her face almost immediately of killing his best friend. Philip actually kind of sucks if you get through his testimony. He's not a great guy. But why would Caroline remain so silent? Why wouldn't she put two and two together while she's being held up and think maybe this awful woman who's been with them is the murderer? My only thought to that is Angela is in the room when the beer is being poured, and we get a little bit of like testimony from multiple people about like how the beer is prepared. It just, nothing there was a huge red flag to me, except for like Angela's involved in touching the glasses. And so perhaps Caroline thought, and she took to her grave to the last minute, that Angela did it as a prank or did it as something, like not knowing what the poison was, like she's just a kid who found it. And for that reason, she basically refused to do anything on the stand except for claiming that maybe your husband committed. That's my best guess. I'm just not as confident in that, although it does, now that I'm saying it, it fits okay. And I guess that it would explain I'm going to reread the letter she left to Angela. Okay, so with the context in my head of Caroline thinking Angela accidentally did the killing, let's reread this letter together. My darling little Angela, you will hear bad news and you will grieve. But what I want to impress upon you is that it is all right. I never told you lies, and I don't now when I say I am actually happy, that I feel an essential rightness and a peace that I have never known before. It's all right, darling. It's oh my God, yeah. She's trying to ease her guilt because she thinks Angela's going to remember accidentally doing that. Don't look back and regret and grieve for me. Go on with your life and succeed. You can, I know. It's all right, darling, and I'm going to Amiens. Oh my God, that's it. I haven't the least doubt that we shall be together. I couldn't have lived without them. Do one thing for me. Be happy. I've told you I'm happy. One has to pay one's debts. It's lovely to feel peace. Debts. I have goosebumps. I have actual goosebumps right now. She's telling her to pay the debt to me. You need to live a happy life. I have fucking goosebumps on my arm. I don't know if you can see those. They're going away, but I had fucking goosebumps. Holy shit! It all adds up! I just don't know how Elsa poisoned her! I got it! Okay, I need to read the denouement. I have like a couple of like quick chapters, and then there's a chapter called The Truth. I'll read that, and we'll check back in. I think I nailed it. This is a really sad, dark story. Oh my God. No, hold up. Elsa did all of this, didn't even realize that a child looked like they were responsible. Or maybe did Elsa know? Did Elsa know that Caroline thought that? Oh my God. I'm trying to remember if there's any inclination of that. I don't think so. I need to read. I'm so excited. I got to read. Before we actually solve this thing and wrap up this murder mystery, I would just like to let you know, don't worry, no sponsor on today's video, except for my own merch. That's right. We are dropping another minimalist, sexy, book-themed design. This time, the 7 Deadly Sins of Readers. Not only on the front are you getting this what I'm calling biblically accurate book, which doesn't even truly make sense, but I like calling it that. But on the back, you have the 7 sins represented with independent pieces of art. Let's see if I can name them off the top of my head. God damn it. I remembered, totally didn't take off the shirt to look. Lust, greed, gluttony, pride, envy, wrath, and... God damn it! This is a cut that Kayla said was super popular when she lived in Korea, and I quite enjoy it. I have been working out, so I feel like it complements my slightly thinner frame without being overly tight. It's cozy, comfy, but fashionable. So if you would like to go ahead and check out this new design, or any of our old ones, just head on over to danielbgreen.com. E at the end of green. And now, let's solve this thing. My God. I can't believe Caroline really did it. Kidding! I mean, that would have been a hell of a twist, but no. No, it's a lot sadder than that. God. All right. Focus up. Let's get into it. This next section opens with Poirot allowing Caroline Jr. to read over the statements that I did. And she seems flummoxed, lost, unsure where to go next, and rightfully scared. But when she comes to the shocking testimony from Governess Williams about the fingerprints, she seems defeated and to accept that her mother did this. But Poirot says, no, that's exactly what I needed to hear to know that your mother was innocent. And he leaves her just lost. And I know he likes, like, Poirot enjoys the dramatic effect. This is a grieving this is a grieving daughter who thinks her mom's a murderer. Poirot, maybe for once, you flamboyant fuck, you just tell her what's going. But no, Poirot and his stashes need. Oh my God, his assistant hasn't been here this whole time. I just realized that. I wish he was. Poirot decides that to be certain he knows what's going on, he can't tell Carla, until he's 100%. He needs to ask 5 more questions. First, he talks to Philip Blake. He sees each piggy in the same order again. And he asks about, hey, there was a night where you were seen going out of Caroline's bedroom at an inopportune hour. And Philip says, no, there was no affair. She rejected me and said she was a one-man woman and was loyal to her husband despite his infidelity. And that made me hate her all the more. Yeah, Philip sucks, dude. And Poirot goes, okay, I need you to meet with me at the end of everything. Come to my place at this time and date. And Philip agrees. He then goes and sees the brother, Meredith, and says, hey, take me to the poison shed. By the way, we don't get Meredith resuming his poisoning. I'm a little disappointed. But not resuming his poisoning. I meant resuming his chemistry. Oh man, maybe it's good he's not. Yeah, you're incompetent. But Poirot asks him, what ordered people leave that day? And Meredith says, I don't remember, but they try and recreate the scene. And he goes, the person left in the place behind me was Caroline. And I was walking out with Elsa. And Poirot goes, that's all I need to know. I'm going to go see her. So he then goes and sees Elsa. And he asks, quite frankly, a question I saw none of this coming. I'm flummoxed again by this. He says, did Meredith propose to you after the trial? And Elsa says yes. And I didn't get that. But okay, that's a thing. And then he goes to see Governess Williams and says, hey, was it the crowbar or the paperweight? And she's like, whoa, God, I've never heard about the crowbar story. No, when Caroline accidentally hurt Angela, it was with a paperweight. And what is this all about? You can't still be investigating this. You read my letter. You know she's guilty. And Poirot goes, no. You see, you do not see with your eye. You see with your mind's eye. And that is, again, Agatha Christie being well aware that eyewitness testimony is unreliable, far ahead of her time. Oh, wait, I just realized why my camera is at a different angle. It's because it's now on the back of that chair. I spent a while adjusting it, really confused. You don't care. Moving on. And that brings him to talking to Angela. But he says, hey, I don't actually need to ask her a question. So it's actually not 5 questions. The title of this is a lie. And instead, like he does with everyone else, he just tells Angela to come to my place because Poirot likes his dramatic reveals and he wants to gather everybody to do one. And so that brings us to our 5 little piggies in Poirot's place. Oh, and John Rattery, who is Caroline Jr.'s fiance. He's here now. Hi! It's a weird time to introduce a character, Agatha Christie, but they're both there as well. And Poirot begins going over the testimonies. And he also I love Poirot's characterization because people start giving him a little bit of guff. And so he just starts airing dirty laundry. Like, oh yeah, like Meredith and the proposal, boom. Also Philip and the affair thing, boom. Like he's just throwing it in people's faces a little bit, like right there. You off, yeah. But before long, he begins his explanation. And this takes me to that last minute realization I had about Angela. See how by this explanation, everything falls into place where Caroline's own reactions are concerned. Look at the series of events from her point of view. To begin with, on the preceding evening, an event occurs which reminds her forcibly of her own undisciplined girlhood. Angela throws a paperweight at Amyas. By the way, that happened because those two were fighting all the time. That's why that was emphasized before. That, remember, is what she herself did many years ago. Angela shouts out that she wishes Amyas was dead. Then, on the next morning, Caroline comes into a little conservatory and finds Angela tampering with the beer. Remembering Miss Williams' words, Angela was there. She looked guilty. Guilty of playing truant was what Miss Williams meant. But to Caroline, Angela's guilty face, as she was caught unawares, would have a different meaning. Remember that on at least one occasion before, Angela had put things in Amyas's drink. It was an idea which might readily occur to her. Caroline takes the bottle that Angela gives her and goes down with it to the battery, and there she pours it out and gives it to Amyas, and he makes a face as he downs it, utters those significant words. Everything tastes foul today. Caroline has no suspicion then, but after lunch she goes down to the battery and finds her husband dead, and she has no doubt at all that he has been poisoned. She had not done it. Who then has? And the whole thing comes over her with a rush. Angela's threats, Angela's face stooping over the beer, caught unawares. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Why has the child done it? As a revenge on Amyas? Perhaps not meaning to kill, just to make him sick or ill. Or has she done it for her, Caroline's sake? Has she realized and resented Amyas's desertion of her sister? Caroline remembers oh so well her own undisciplined, violent emotion at Angela's age. And only one thought springs to her mind. How can she protect Angela? Angela handled the bottle. Angela's fingerprints will be on it. She wipes it and polishes it. If only everybody can be got to believe it is suicide. If Amyas's fingerprints are the only ones found, she tries to fit his dead fingers around the bottle, working desperately, listening for someone to come. Once take that assumption as true, and everything from there on fits in. Her anxiety about Angela all along, her insistence on getting her away, keeping her out of touch with what was going on. Her fear of Angela being questioned unduly by the police. Finally, her overwhelming anxiety to get Angela out of England before the trial comes on, because she is always terrified that Angela might break down and confess. And it looks like Elsa's in the free, and no, it's not going to be, of course, the governess. It's not going to be Meredith. It's not going to be Philip, no matter how much he sucks. And instead, it's going to be our Angela, who accidentally or deliberately stole and put... Nope!
Surprise, motherfucker!
You see, Angela turns around and goes, absolutely not. That did not happen. Granted, she did actually play a prank that day. I totally forgot about this, but apparently Meredith heard what he thought was a cat in his lab. Turns out it was actually Angela going to steal some just nasty smelling stuff, tasting stuff, to put in Amyas's drink to get back at him about the school thing and about the treating her stepsister shittily. And so it looks even worse for her than I picked up on. But Angela says no. I did do that day, and she actually is like, wow, I didn't remember it was that day because of this traumatic thing happening to me as a child, but I didn't poison anyone's drink. But that doesn't change the fact that Caroline thought she did. This takes Poirot to talking about, well, the chapter title, The Truth. Hercule Poirot said mildly, I am not a fool, and I do not think so. I know quite well who killed Amyas Crail. He paused. There is always a danger of accepting facts as provided, which are really nothing of the kind. Let us take the situation at
Alderberry. A very old situation. 2 women and 1 man. We have taken it for granted that Amyas Krell proposed to leave his wife for the other woman, but I suggest to you now that he never intended to do anything of the kind. He had had infatuations for women before. They obsessed him while they lasted, but they were soon over. The women he had fallen in love with were usually women of certain experience. They did not expect too much of him, but this time the woman did. She was not, you see, a woman at all. She was a girl. And in Caroline Krell's words, she was terribly sincere. She may have been hard-boiled and sophisticated in speech, but in love she was frighteningly single-minded, because she herself had a deep and overmastering passion for Amyas Krell. She assumed that he had the same for her. She assumed without any question that their passion was for life. She assumed without asking him that he was going to leave his wife. But why, will you say, did Amyas Krell not undeceive her? And my answer is, the picture. He wanted to finish his picture. To some people, that sounds incredible, but not to anybody who knows about artists. And we have already accepted the explanation in principle. That conversation between Krell and Meredith Blake is more intelligible now. Krell is embarrassed. Pats Blake on the back, assures him optimistically the whole thing is going to pan out all right. To Amyas Krell, you see, everything is simple. He is painting a picture, slightly encumbered by what he describes as a couple of jealous, neurotic women, but neither of them is going to be allowed to interfere with what to him is his most important thing in life. If he were to tell Elsa the truth, it would be all up with the picture. Perhaps in the first flush of his feelings for her, he did talk about leaving Caroline. Men do say these things when they are in love. Perhaps he merely let it be assumed, as he is letting it be assumed now. He doesn't care what Elsa assumes. Let her think what she likes. Anything to keep her quiet for another day or 2. Then he will tell the truth. That things between them are over. That he has never been a man to be troubled with scruples. He did, I think, make an effort not to get embroiled with Elsa to begin with. He warned her what kind of man he was, but she would not take the warning. She rushed on her fate, and to a man like Krell, women were fair game. If you had asked him, he would have said easily that Elsa was young. She'd soon get over it. That was the way Amyas Krell's mind worked. His wife was actually the only person he cared about at all. He wasn't worrying much about her. She'd only got to put up for things for a few days longer. He was furious with Elsa for blurting out things to Caroline, but he still optimistically thought it would be all right. Caroline would forgive him, as she had done so often before. And Elsa would have to lump it. So simple are the problems of life to a man like Amyas Krell. But I think that last evening he became really worried about Caroline. Not about Elsa. Perhaps he went to her room and she refused to speak to him. At any rate, after a restless night, he took her aside after breakfast and blurted out the truth. He had been infatuated with Elsa, but it was over. Once he'd finished the picture, he'd never see her again. And it was in answer to that Caroline Krell cried out indignantly, "You and your women." That phrase, you see, put Elsa in a class with others. Those others who had gone their way. And she added indignantly, "Someday I'll kill you." She was angry, revolted by his callousness, and by his cruelty to the girl. When Philip Blake saw her in the hall and heard her murmur to herself, "It's too cruel," it was Elsa she was thinking. As for Krell, he came out of the library, found Elsa with Philip Blake, and brusquely ordered her down to go on with the sitting. What he did not know was that Elsa Greer had been sitting just outside the library window and had overheard everything, and the account she gave later of that conversation was not the true one. There was only her word for it, remember. Imagine the shock it must have been to her to hear the truth brutally spoken. On the previous afternoon, Meredith Blake had told us that whilst he was waiting for Caroline to leave this room, he was standing in the doorway with his back to the room. He was talking to Elsa Greer. That means that she would have been facing him, that she could see exactly what Caroline was doing over his shoulder, and that she was the only person who could do so. She saw Caroline take that poison. She said nothing, but she remembered it as she sat outside the library window. When Amyas Krell came out, she made the excuse of wanting a pull-over. They went up to Caroline Krell's room to look for the poison. Women know where other women are likely to hide things. She found it, and being careful not to obliterate any fingerprints or leave her own, she drew off the fluid into a fountain pen filler. Then she came down and went off with Krell to the Battery Garden, and presently, no doubt, she poured him out some beer and tossed it down in his usual way. Meanwhile, Caroline Krell was seriously disturbed when she saw Elsa come up to the house, this time really to fetch a pullover. Caroline slipped quickly down to the Battery Garden and tackled her husband. What he was doing is shameful. She won't stand for it. It's unbearably cruel and hard on the girl. Amyas, irritable at being interrupted, says it's all settled. When the picture is done, he'll send the girl packing. It's all settled. I'll send her packing, I tell you. And then they hear footsteps of the two Blakes. And Caroline comes out and, slightly embarrassed, remembers something about Angela in school and having a lot to do. And by a natural association of ideas, the two men judge the conversation they have overheard refers to Angela. And I'll send her packing becomes I'll see to her packing. And Elsa, pullover in hand, comes down the path, cool and smiling, and takes up the pose once more. She has counted no doubt upon Caroline being suspected, and the cognac bottle being found in her room. But Caroline now plays into her hand completely. She brings down some iced beer and pours it out for her husband. Amyas finishes it off, making a face, and says, "Everything tastes foul today. Do you see how significant that remark is? Everything tastes foul." Then there has been something else before that beer that has tasted unpleasant, and the taste of which is still in his mouth. And the one other point, Philip Blake speaks of Creel's staggering a little, and wonder if he's been drinking. But that slight stagger was the first sign of the cognac working, and that means that it has already been administered to him some time before Caroline brought him the iced bottle of beer. And so Elsa Greer sat on the grey wall and posed. Since she must keep him from suspecting until it was too late, she talked to Amyas Creel brightly and naturally. Presently, she saw Meredith on the bench above and waved her hand to him and acted her part even more thoroughly for his behalf. And Amyas Creel, a man who detests illness and refuses to give in to it, painted doggedly on till his limbs failed and his speech thickened, and he sprawled there on the bench, helpless, but with his mind still clear. The bell sounded from the house, and Meredith left the bench to come down to the battery. I think in that brief moment, Elsa left her place and ran across to the table and dropped the last few drops of poison into the beer glass that held the last innocent drink. She got rid of the dropper on the path up to the house, crushing it to powder. Then she met Meredith in the doorway. There is a glare there coming in out of shadows. Meredith does not see it clearly. Only his friend sprawled in a familiar position, and he saw his eyes turn from the picture in what he described as a malevolent glare. How much did Amyas know or guess? How much his conscious mind knew we cannot tell. But his hand and his eye were faithful. Hercule Poirot gestured to the picture on the wall. I should have known when I first saw that picture, for it is a very remarkable picture. It is the picture of a murderess painted by her victim. It is the picture of a girl watching her lover die.
I got that shit. I got a lot of that. There were a few things I missed, but I got a lot, and I'm pretty proud of that. And this is a murder. But what evidence do they actually have? And this brings us to the aftermath, where Elsa tells everyone to leave the room but her and Poirot. She tells him, "You're smart, but what can you do?" And Poirot says, "Likely nothing. I'll try and get the police to issue a posthumous pardon for Caroline, but I can't do anything to you." And so Elsa gets up and gives a little, just one last disturbing speech.
I shouldn't care. If I were stumbling in the dock, fighting for my life, there might be something in that, something alive, exciting. I might enjoy it. Your husband would not. She stared at him. Do you think I care in the least what my husband would feel? No, I do not. I do not think you have ever in your life cared about what any other person would feel. If you had, you might be happier. She said sharply, Why are you sorry for me? Because, my child, you have so much to learn. What have I got to learn? All the grown-up emotions, pity, sympathy, understanding. The only things you know, have ever known, are love and hate. Elsa said, I saw Caroline take the coin. I thought she meant to kill herself. That would have simplified things, and then, the next morning I found out. He told her that he didn't care a button about me. He had cared, but it was all over. Once he'd finished the picture, he'd send me packing. She'd nothing to worry about, he said. And she was sorry for me. Do you understand what that did to me? I found the stuff and I gave it to him, and I sat there watching him die. I've never felt so alive, so exalted, so full of power. I watched him die. She flung out her hands. I didn't understand that I was killing myself, not him. Afterwards, I saw her caught in a trap, and that was no good either. I couldn't hurt her. She didn't care. She escaped from it all. Half the time, she wasn't there. She and Amyas both escaped. They went somewhere where I couldn't get at them. But they didn't die. I died. Elsa Didsum got up. She went across the door. She said again, I died. In the hall, she passed two young people whose life together was just beginning. The chauffeur held open the door for the car, and Lady Ditsum got in
and the chauffeur wrapped the fur around her legs. And so, did she escape justice? Maybe, but she's miserable. And holy God! I have a feeling, I haven't looked up, I might actually need to verify this. This was a later in Agatha Christie's murder mystery writing career story, because it feels to me like someone who's done a lot of murder mysteries and decided instead to have some contemplations about grief and morality and how there can be a situation where there are awful people on all sides. But I think there was an important note at the end, and it's why John Rattery is brought in, because still, people did the right thing when they could and when it mattered. Caroline tried to cover for her sister that she loved, thinking that a prank had gone too far. And because of that, Angela got to live an incredible life. Poirot has now, well, justice hasn't necessarily been served, freed the mind of her daughter. And if you believe that kind of thing, finally, Amyas and Caroline have found their peace. And that isn't the most tragic end. But in terms of being a gut-wrenching Agatha Christie story, this one is filled with vipers. Phil was so consumed by lust for his best friend's partner that he started trashing her, even in the wake of her husband's death, where he should have been the one to show up and support her, hear her out, try to be a friend. We see the governess who saw something god-awful happen and sees her friend doing something that looks like covering up a crime and has to bury it. And actually, the one person who would, because she has so much respect, and it's said time and time again for Caroline, would have believed her otherwise because of all this deceit, ends up actually accepting this person was a killer, and it fouls her insides. Meredith's entire life is exploded. This job, this career he had, this hobby is now so tainted he can never go back to it. It's absurd for me to even have thought he could have picked it up again. And even the murderer has spent a life completely hollow, not even caring about their own husband's feelings, and sitting with what's described as dead eyes. And that touches on one important theme that I feel Agatha Christie played with subtly in the background that only kind of boils to the surface once things are said and done. This is a 16-year-old crime, right? We're talking about these people who are in entirely different stages of their life. And that's why I don't think this is necessarily a murder mystery, or at least it wasn't in the purest sense to Agatha Christie, because it's far more about the long-term ramifications and impacts of this traumatic event, these awful avalanche of circumstances that just altered trajectories. And we see, fortunately, thank God, some people come out on top. That was my attempt to draw a heart, and be stronger than it, while others are swallowed. And throughout all of it, Poirot is a flamboyant, sassy genius. But let me know down in the comments below what grade you would give me. I definitely didn't earn an A, but I think I recovered pretty well in the back half. I've learned my lesson well and truly. I'm not gonna lock in before like even the first third of the book is done. That was foolish, though I still think my story would have been a good one. It's just that Agatha Christie was like, I see that option. Let's do a more extreme, also extra twist on top of it version, because she's the queen. But speaking of her being the queen, in the last murder mystery solve-along we did, I said I gotta go anywhere but Agatha Christie for the next one, just because I want to experience it. I really mean that this time. So please, on top of giving me a grade, suggest another murder mystery for me to try my best. And I specifically want the most difficult murder mystery that's technically solvable out there. I don't know a whole lot about this genre, but I trust mass audience polling. Thank you, everyone. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.